start with your introduction. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
So sure, I'm JoAnn Stonier. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Mastercard. I have held that position since 2018. Prior to that, I was the Chief Privacy Officer. I think that's why Sanjeev is saying I've done kind of a breadth of these roles. And during that time, I also had information governance. And so I've been doing data for quite some time. Prior to joining Mastercard, I was the Chief Privacy Officer at American Express. And prior to that, I've held a series of different positions, some based on data, some doing strategy work, some doing M&A work. I was also fortunate enough to be the assistant to the chairman of American Express, Harvey Golub at the time. And so I've had an interesting career both on the business strategy side and also using data as an asset for innovation. So it's a pleasure to be here.
That is fantastic to hear, because you've done even, if I'm not mistaken, even some system development and data strategy.
Yes. Yes.
So,
yes, I've done that a number of different times during my career, for sure.
Oh, wow.
And currently, obviously, yes. So we can talk about that.
and JoAnn, while we are talking about your background, can you tell us about your education and your professional background?
Sure. This is always kind of an interesting question because it's not what everybody expects. So my undergraduate degree, my first degree actually was an associate's in computer science. And then I got my bachelor's in accounting. My first job was doing auditing for PricewaterhouseCoopers. And at the time, computer-assisted auditing was relatively new. And so a lot of my work back then was creating data flows and flowcharts. We didn't call them data flows at the time. We called them flowcharts. And we put in all sorts of controls and understanding of how financial information was being utilized both by manual processes as well as machines. And so I cut my teeth on a lot of the controls that had to be put in for financial companies doing financial audits back as my first job. But I moved from there quickly to working for companies like PepsiCo, as well as Walden and Borders Books and Music, while I went to law school. So I'm also a lawyer. I did employment law for a while, but while I was in law school, the companies that I was working for, I was really doing work on financial systems. And so helping to build them, helping to design them, helping to really think about how systems really needed to be created to really manage data. And so while we didn't necessarily think about them as data-driven systems, then we were really thinking about the technology. I think I was doing data work all the way along, even though it wasn't maybe necessarily defined as such. When I then, after I was a lawyer for a while, I joined American Express as they were trying to reimagine their business. And so I did some work on reimagining some of their systems. And I found myself being asked to work in the general counsel's office as that function was reimagining itself, its processes, also using computers and technology and data. And I worked there helping them with their processes, and then was asked to join the chairman's office, as I mentioned, working directly for Harvey Golub as his vice president assistant, where I really got a chance to understand business strategy at the highest levels of the firm. And that, I think, changed my thinking forever, because I got to work on things like the investment strategy of the firm, mergers and acquisitions, just really an understanding of how businesses really develop their business strategy, where they're going, how they use all of their resources. And I think that set me up for a really interesting moment, because I also helped with moving into a part of the business at the time that was doing acquisitions. That was part of a company now called Ameriprise. But I also helped American Express with that divestiture when they spun what was American Express Financial Advisors. They became Ameriprise, and I worked on that divestiture. I pretty much was working my way out of a job, but then Ken Chenault was the chairman and CEO at the time, and he came to me and asked if I would be their first privacy officer, partly because of my legal background and partly because I understood the firm and its systems and processes. And so that's how my pivot, if you will, and my trajectory of my career has always had some data elements to it, even as an attorney. So privacy laws, obviously, being the lawyer for the data. And so I began really my deep journey into data from the privacy lens.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is great to know. So, JoAnn, how does a typical day look like for you?
I'm not sure any day is typical, um, but I think that as a chief data officer, I have the really good fortune of my job is really to help Mastercard, understand data as an innovation asset while understanding current and get this future risks that we need to design within. And so that means understanding a very rapidly changing landscape, both from the perspective of what our company is doing with data and what the business world. So Mastercard operates a financial network, connecting consumers, banks, merchants, and governments around the globe to make payments safe, simple, and smart. But increasingly, other types of data as we move into the world of open banking, open data, and also validation of digital identity. And so, as we do that, my job is to help our business teams develop new products and solutions, making sure we're in compliance, obviously, with laws like privacy, making sure that our information systems, our connected ecosystems are safe and secure, as well as complying with new and emerging laws and guarding against emerging risks like misinformation, malinformation, data harms that we have to look ahead to, as well as minimizing bias and other types of harms in our AI and machine learning work. So my day, right, varies. I can be working on one hand with civil society organizations on thinking about issues of the future. I can be working with our different product teams as we develop new products and solutions. I can be working with my chief information officer and his team as we design new systems and new infrastructure for the firm, as well as the implementation of that. And then with my privacy team, my team is really responsible for operational compliance. And so my team really owns a lot of those systems that result from laws like the GDPR, CCPA, and others. So depending upon what we're doing, we can be designing a system, designing a product, and or implementing those, as well as trying to influence the dialogue on a global stage.
So John, if when you're developing a product, so let's say, going back maybe 5, 6 years ago, before GDPR came into effect.
Yes.
So you design a new product and then GDPR comes along, then CCPA. Now we are only in the last few months of CCPA before it turns to CPRA. And then all these states and countries are producing these new privacy laws, and the data residency is getting stricter and stricter globally.
Yes.
How do you handle this constant churn in the legal privacy regulatory space? Because you've developed the product, and how is it fungible enough to keep up with these
So
compliances?
first of all, we always design ahead. So we don't design for today's requirements, we
I
design
see.
for the emerging requirements.
Right.
And we look at regulation as
Right.
part of a design brief, right? So we don't look at it as something that stops us, but it's just one factor within the constraints of a product design. And I think I also have a design background. I went back to design school after,
Yes.
unfortunately, being downtown in New York City on 9/11. And so I actually use design thinking a lot in what we create at Mastercard. And so if you understand where regulators' thinking is going and where society's thinking is going, it helps you really design products and solutions centered upon first how individuals would feel about how their data is being used. And while Mastercard is really a B2B company with a B2C brand, many of our products, because of the way we are actually connected through banks, through merchants, through governments, we are a B2B2C company in how things are executed. So we always design with the consumer or the individual at the center of all of our conversations, even though many times we're going to execute through a partner, right? And so if you do that and you understand what the risks are from that individual's perspective, you can design quite well if you're thinking about what the potential impacts, harms, risks, and benefits are to an individual. Now, that's not to say we design individualized products, right? We're designing for big populations. But if you think about how they're going to be perceived and used, you actually can design even with those laws changing.
I
Because
see.
what's happening is that we also are in conversation. Now, our privacy officer or our information security officer may work on things specific, but I'm always engaged on the broad themes. And then I work with civil society organizations to understand where we're going. So our design process for products, we call it the studio process. We are always looking ahead at where things are going so that we can first design well for products that are going to be what we call sustainable for a 1 to 3 year period. And then if a product is going to need to change, we will do a review using that same process to then refresh the requirements and relaunch a product if it needs to for changing regulatory requirements or any other requirement. It may just be a market requirement, maybe a geographic requirement, and maybe a customer requirement, quite frankly, that we have to handle in the same way.
So, JoAnn, I was quite intrigued. I saw on your LinkedIn that you have interior design.
Yes.
For like 17 years, you've had that. So, what is that interior design, and how does that physical interior design transcend into a software product design?
So, if you think about it, the interior design actually was always a dream of mine since I was very young. When I was in grade school, I wanted to go to art high school, and my parents said, no, you're going the academic route, which I did.
Yeah.
And so when I went back to interior design school, I probably was the first lawyer to go back to interior design school.
Yes.
But it really does help your thinking, because designers are people who are creative. They have to think out of the box, but they also always have some set of constraints, right? Whether that's where the electric is, where the plumbing is, where you're situated, what your zoning laws are, how tall the ceilings are, how high they are, where are the windows placed, where's the doors. Now, of course, you can change things, but there's usually a cost associated with that, right? Or there's going to be a delay, right? And that cost can be money, it can be time, right? It can be effectiveness of a design. Well, that thinking, right, in that define stage, right, and then a design stage and prototyping, well, that works quite well in the world of data and works quite well when you're building products and solutions, right? So can you come up with discovery, which is the first phase of design? Can you then do a definition phase, right, of what are you going to design? And then can you do a design phase, which includes prototyping and testing before you would do any kind of launch? So the design cycle works beautifully, whether you're designing with data or you're designing with real materials like my office behind me or your office behind you or your home, whether that's a kitchen, a bathroom, or a conference room for a commercial client. So I think it's very complementary.
Oh, wow! It's quite unique to lawyer design, interior design,
And data.
and data. So, okay, that's
I think
fantastic.
it says a lot that I get bored easily. So, but I think it keeps me
Yes.
interested in multiple disciplines.
I'm actually afraid where are you going to go from here? So, but we'll come.
I don't know. Data's kept me pretty interested for quite
Yes.
some time. So I
Yeah.
think it has multiple reasons to keep me interested for quite some time ahead.
Absolutely. So, as a CDO, and with the privacy background you have, who are the other people you touched upon CIO? But I'm just trying to like see if you can add some color. Let's say there's been an attempt to breach, or like some nefarious bad actors are at your system. Who are the people you work with, and how does it work inside of Mastercard?
Sure. So I work with a variety of our product teams, right? I work with our head of our data and services business, or the head of our cyber business, for example, or a head of our digital identity business or open banking. So typically there's one line of business. We talk about them as data domains, right? Different areas of our business that are using data to design new products and solutions. And they can be fraud products, they can be cyber products, they can also be what we call econometric products. And we also have our Center for Center for Inclusive Growth, right? And so we also do some work that is for positive impact socially, right? Social impact. And so depending upon what the, let's say, problem we're trying to solve, right, or solution we're trying to build, I will work with different teams across the company. And my teams will do that as we develop a data strategy to solve for the business problem or solution that's trying to be solved and or built for, right? And we look at things like data rights. We look at things like what data is available, what data is fit for purpose, things that other data offices will typically do. But we come up with then a brief that then we will utilize. So first and foremost, I work very heavily with my business colleagues across the firm. I mentioned I work with my chief information officer, who's really our chief technology officer, and his team. And those teams vary from everyone from our enterprise architecture team to the head of our data warehouse, who also includes the cloud, on really execution. So we also are the data designers for that team. And so how is information going to be, or data going to be structured in our systems? Right now, we're looking at our Network of the Future initiative. And so how are we redesigning our network for the future generations to come? And so my team is heavily involved in the data design of that work. And so I'm involved in a lot of those meetings. And then I also work with our privacy officer, who used to report to me when I owned that team and I was the privacy officer, and work with that team in influencing our response to pending law, as well as a law or maybe a court case like the Schrems case. What are going to have to be the execution activities, the operational activities to ensure compliance? And so together we will put together the brief of activities that need to be executed. And quite often they require the creation of a system, a modification of a system, inclusion in our data inventory, for example. Maybe it's enhancements to what we call our data access platform, where individuals can request access to their data at Mastercard, or the building of something else. And so I will interact with that team as well. Our information security officer, if there's a breach, our franchise team as well, because not only do we have to look at breaches inside Mastercard, but we also have a process for everyone who runs on our network. And so for those, what we call account data compromise events, I can also be involved in some of those and work with our franchise team. So it's a very wide job. Again, it depends on the day. So, but I get to work with really, I'm fortunate, I get to work with really talented individuals.
Yeah.
And then the other person that I work very, very closely with is the head of artificial intelligence. That's kind of a frontier right now where we are working very heavily on ethical and responsible AI, the governance there, minimization of bias. We have a whole heavy governance process there, as well as techniques that we are deploying to ensure we understand our products and solutions in that area as we design them. So all of those individuals on a daily basis I would interact with.
So JoAnn, I'm curious, where in Mastercard, where does the CDO role sit? When,
So I
because
have
in Gartner, we did all
reporting.
these surveys and we found some are in IT, some are in business, some are hybrid, some
So
are independent.
so
Yeah.
I talk about it as I kind of have three masters. I
Okay.
report into the head of the data and services business because I need to support that first. But I also have a dotted line into the chief administrative officer, who I need to support on the risk management side because of the laws and requirements. He used to be the general counsel, so know him well. And then I also work closely again with the CI to execute from a systemic perspective.
I see. And where do you see the trend, or what recommendation would you give as to where is the most effective use of the CDO? What space should they be in?
So I think there's a number of places where a CDO needs to be effective, right? I think number one, we have to be the deep subject matter expert for your firm. But I think what's happening is that data knowledge is getting democratized, as it should be. So increasingly, we see data skills is going to be one of the key skill sets for the workplace of the future, right? Just like financial acumen is a baseline skill set, leadership ability, managerial experience, right? But if you think about it, right, that's financial assets are one class of asset that executives need to be able to navigate. People assets, right? You also need to be able to manage your people assets or your people. And now data assets and technological assets, I think, are the next tranche. And all of us have learned technology, right? As it becomes available, we learn the next generation of software and systems that are available to us in different companies that are needed to do your job. I think data is the next skill set. But I think the CDO's job will be to really make sure that companies are doing several things. One, that we're using data really efficiently inside our organizations to measure performance, right? And to make sure that we're working efficiently. But as we do that, oftentimes we also then are discovering we have products and solutions that can be shared with our customers. That's very, very typical at Mastercard in our fraud solution space. We have to prevent fraud on our network, right? All those tap swipes, keying in of card numbers, right? We have to make sure that our network is safe and that we're preventing fraud. But then we work those, a lot of those solutions then can become products that our banking customers can use as they're also guarding further types of fraud in the banking systems, right? So that is where one piece of our business, then, one piece of our data activity actually engenders business opportunities. I think that the data officer also has to be, in charge of kind of that data literacy. We do data governance, right? Meaning, are we making the right decisions about our data? Are we doing the right things? I think we also, for me, we really have based a lot of our thinking about data on our data responsibility principles, making sure that we have a responsibility framework that really, again, puts the individual at the center of our data practices. So, we believe that individuals own their own data, that they should have the right to control it, have the ability to interact with us. And again, we're a B2B company, but they need to understand what we're doing, that they have the right, obviously, to privacy and security, but that they should also understand the benefit when we're using data to keep our network safe and secure. All of those things are what we believe an individual deserves. But then we teach our people that if you're going to use data, privacy and security are the baseline. You have to be accountable. So you better understand what you're doing with data. We need to be able to explain it or be transparent. We need to have integrity in our practices, especially as new data techniques emerge. We have to be able to innovate with data. And then we also use data for social impact. And so all of those things, I think, are really important for a chief data officer to make sure they come to life in their firm in all of the different processes that I've described. Data governance, data management, data classification, ontology, right? All of the data graphs, all of the work that a typical data officer does. I think the bar just keeps going up as the world of data continues to evolve, as you so eloquently said at the start of the conversation.
Thank you, JoAnn. This the amount of new stuff that comes in, it's just mind-boggling. Now we're talking about Web3. We also have data mesh, data fabric, and you mentioned that you keep up with some of the new data techniques that are coming in. What are some of the top hot ticket new innovations in the data space that you have been coming across?
Well, I mean, just keeping up with all things in financial services. So crypto, right? Blockchain, AI, machine learning. These are not things that were native when I got out of school, right? So you must learn. Aristotle says, "Learn by doing," right? Number one. I also read. I subscribe to a number of blogs from academic institutions, as well as I have pretty intense chats with my peers and other experts to really learn the new tools and techniques and technologies. Just last week, I attended a gathering of peers, and it was a really interesting conversation because it was of experts, not just in financial services, right? You can get a little myopic, but of executives across different industries. And I found it fascinating to listen to what CIOs are doing in tech, in kind of what we would call traditional industrial companies, power companies, right? Manufacturing. Why? Well, they're beginning to augment their own factory floors and their methodologies with augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, in financial services, we've been doing data for a very long time, right? But if we understand what's happening outside, we become better advisors to all of the merchants that we assist doing business with, right? And so you talk about Web 3.0, right? Think about all of that additional data and start thinking about what will the metaverse look like, and how do we begin to understand that transactional loop that's going to look a little bit different with NFTs, right? And so that you, in your metaverse form or your avatar form, you're going to buy perhaps some type of unique avatar, or I'm going to use a pair of sneakers that you've designed, right, in the metaverse, only to then come and transact offline to actually purchase them from a vendor, from a merchant. You pick Nike, Adidas, Reebok, right? You're going to actually go and get those customized to you. That's a whole new world of commerce that Mastercard needs to understand, right? That we all need to understand. And so keeping up with things like that that don't look obvious right now, right? That's part of the financial world, but it really is coming. And we all need to embrace kind of what's new, what's exciting. I hang out with my 15-year-old nephew who's a gamer, right? And try to understand what he's thinking about. All of these things are going to make our world very different in the near future. So trying to understand what that's going to look like and feel like to the people, right, that are going to inhabit it, and what role should we be playing in that?
Yeah, and also because you're in the B2B to C, but B2B is such a huge part of your business. There's this whole data sharing ecosystem, which is like, with data exchanges, data marketplaces. That's
Yes.
another area of rapid enhancement I've noticed these days. And now we see data exchanges coming from the data providers, the cloud providers, third-party providers, ETL vendors, so everyone's so
And how you do that and protect privacy, right? We do
yes,
not share, we do not sell, we do not share our transaction data other than from the party who gave it to us, right? The merchant,
right.
the bank. But yet we create information insights derived from that. Well, what are the next generation information insights going to need to be when you think about this? Again, I'm going back to this metaverse concept, right? This virtual reality, this parallel universe in which individuals are going to transact there and then come out of that, right? I'm trying to get everybody to understand things are going to start there and then come into the physical world. I think we're so used to, in our current paradigm, we start in our physical world and then we go online, right? Or we go online and it matches up to the physical reality. I think we have to get used to this idea that things are going to start in the kind of virtual world and then come into us physically. What does that feel like? And so I think we're in for some differentiated thinking in our processes, and how data, again, is going to be really important in making that reality come to life.
It's such a fascinating
It is. It
topic
is.
because we don't have the
And when you
answers.
say to me, what am I going to do next? That's why
Yeah,
I think data is going to provide plenty
correct.
of interesting opportunities.
Yeah. So how do you measure the success? Like, how do you know that today was a successful day? Uh,
Well, I'm talking to you, so clearly it must be success. No. So what we do, we have key performance indicators, right?
yeah. Mhm.
Really looking at the utility of our data and how much my team's work on design and
Yeah.
implementation actually can be tracked through to our products and solutions and their adoption. So how much of the revenue that is being generated has actually been engendered by the steps that I described
Very good.
previously, is
Yeah.
showing up in our products and solutions.
Yeah.
Obviously, we also have some efficiency metrics, right? That also, we can show efficiency improvements, right? By improving processes, having dashboards and information that's available to our executives. But by and large, what we're trying to do more and more is understand, again, data as that enabling asset, and the work that we've done to maybe improve quality or to improve a source or to streamline a process. And then how does that show up in the revenue that's being generated from that data confined
Mm,
within a
love
product
it.
or a service? So
Yeah.
it's been a little labor intensive, I have to admit, because we do not have like product P&Ls or things like that. But we're getting teams to begin to understand that by thinking about it that way, it also makes it easier to justify different investments. And so we're at the start of that journey, but that's another fun journey
Yeah.
for all of us to be on.
This is the most exciting part about data these days. I tell people data governance and data, some of these data roles are truly the sexiest jobs of 21st century. And the reason is because in the past, just a few years ago, we would hoard the data and we would be very defensive about it. today listening to you is so refreshing, because you're looking to unlock and unleash the potential of data and measure how much benefit the business derive from data. But like you said, it's not easy to do it because you have to protect the data,
Mhm.
you know.
Well,
So
and for us, the same source of data may be used multiple ways. So we have to
right.
be careful about, I'm sure you've been asked and other people have been asked about who owns the data. And so my answer, of course, is the enterprise owns the data. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Right?
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we've passed that question. But who's the
great.
right steward? Well, okay, we can have a primary steward, but that's for this type of use. It may have the same data source, but this use is very different from another.
Mhm.
And so both of those uses are completely valid and they generate different things. Measuring that is way more interesting than who owns the data.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because I think we have conflated ownership of data with accountability of data. So the
Yes.
domains need to be accountable, but the enterprise owns the data. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
yeah.
Completely agree.
So Joanne, this we've talked about the happy paths of all the good things. I'm sure that days where it's like super challenging or things. What are some of those challenges?
I think the challenge is the speed of everything changing at
Mm,
once,
yeah.
especially now in a post-COVID world, right? I think that there's been a lot of pent-up energy and desire to move forward. And so we're seeing not only the desire to use data differently, but there's been a pent up desire for innovation that I think, I don't want to say it was stalled, but it was paused in some industries. It was also, I think we didn't, I mean, we had some, sectors of the economy that were frozen, right? And now
Mhm.
things are, I'm going to just say thawing. And so what's happening now is that there's a pent up demand for change and a pent up, the demand for data is increasing. But what I think are some of my most challenging days is when everything feels like it's changing. Every lever is moving at the same time. And
Mhm.
so you have to kind of understand, well, how am I prioritizing all of this change? So I've got changing regulation. I've got changing infrastructure as we design for the future. I've got changing data. The data profile is changing, right? How do I design, to my point before, how do I design the next generation of data solutions in an environment where the ground feels like it's moving? And how do I help my team design? In a way that's sustainable for the near future, right? We don't design anymore for 10-year hops, right? Which is what we used to be able to do. So we have to design with a great deal of flexibility, but also make sense of the here and now, but also the near term. And so I think that's some of the more challenging aspects of what we're doing. And it's not so much in the analytics space. I think that's has its own challenges with AI and machine learning, but I think we're getting there, and I think people are getting more comfortable asking the questions. I think it is in what type of infrastructure is going to be needed to do the ingestion, to prevent the
Mhm.
harms, to do the tagging and the graphing, so that data can be put in an automated fashion, be put to multiple uses while capturing all the restrictions on it that keep increasing. And
Right.
so it's the next hurdle that I think many data officers are trying to come to. I think vendors aren't quite there yet to help us. So there's a lot of innovation, to your point, on the governance and the management side to enable the next generation and to navigate a growing volume of data. So it makes my brain hurt some days, in a fun way,
Yeah.
but it is challenging for sure.
Right. Right. Do you see? Uh, Actually, I'm sure you're doing cloud migration, but I'm just curious, with all of this privacy, security, data residency, what is the cloud migration strategy within Mastercard?
We're doing it. So we've done portions of our business. We're still in flight just because of some of the security issues for
Right.
us, right?
Right.
We're a little bit differently wired than other companies, right? Just by nature of what we process and the security
Mhm.
risks, right? So we are still in the midst of that, but I can tell you that security is job one, right, for us. And
Mhm.
so that work is still in progress. we are using the cloud more and more. We need to, we have to, we need that speed. But at the same time, we have to secure our information in a manner that other industries don't necessarily have to do it in the same way.
Right.
And so that has become probably the reason for our path being a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical than
I
other
see.
organizations.
I also hear there's this fear governments have on concentration of risk.
Mhm.
So it's not just going to a cloud provider. Sometimes you have to go to multiple cloud
That's
providers,
correct. Well,
which
that's
is
correct, right? I mean, you
I
don't
see.
want to be
Right.
relying on just one, so that's for sure. And I think we're also seeing that in the drive to data localization, right? I think we're seeing that some governments believe that data remaining on soil is a more secure, they believe it to be more secure, even though we believe that that actually brings in different kinds of risks. As you have duplications or
Right.
fragmentation of your infrastructure, there's more incursion points that we have to protect against. So they're both information security risks that we have to handle differently, as well as challenges to usage to make sure that we have the right information available in the infrastructure that we're building to engage our information assets in the right way and not have latency risk, right? And not have
Yes.
misinformation risks and not have duplicative data sets that ever get out of sync. So there's different challenges to that as well.
This is great. I like how we haven't talked about any technology product, but we're talking about all these concepts like latency. Security is, of course, job number one. There's also enabling more use cases through like dynamic authorization. I'm not sure if
Absolutely.
you see that also.
Oh yeah, I mean we're working on our architecture of the future, and so I can't divulge a whole lot about that right now.
Yeah.
But those type of techniques, right? And how are we going to be needing to incorporate, right? The 5G
Mhm.
devices, right? It's really a whole different type of methodology that we have to think through in payments, because payments are going to be embedded in so many different devices beyond those that we are contemplating today. And so, how do we do that validation? How do we ensure, right, that that your device is in fact connected to you and
Yeah.
not, sorry, your, we'll do the benign one, your child, okay, right, your son, your daughter trying to transact on your behalf, your teenager, versus really somebody who has perhaps appropriated a device. And we can talk about your car, we can talk about your home being invaded, but when we think about how wired the world is going to be and how we're going to be transacting, the security issues are the first ones. Privacy comes in next, but then
Yes.
enabling all of this
Right.
for the innovation I think that we all want in this world, right? And
Right.
then layering in, as I was mentioning, kind of this parallel metaverse, right, where you're also going to be transacting. And how do we sync all of that up is kind of on the roadmap of solutions we must provide.
Yeah, so the 5G devices embedding payment options. So you've got security and privacy number one, but then you've got how does the product look in the metaverse? So that's at the application layer. If you go below, you have to ingest.
Yes.
5G data ingestion is real time, high volume.
Well, and we because of the speed at which we have to process, we have to make some real decisions about what data we will be
Yes.
reviewing versus unpacking later, right, for validation. And so, yes,
Correct.
these are the decisions where discussions we're having right now. And now you know why I'm spending so much time with my chief information officer, right?
Yes.
These are the decisions that are going on right now.
Right. Yes. Well, I don't envy you.
Or you maybe you should, because it's really interesting work. So I'm never.
It is interesting, and it is. I make it my job to keep up with this because it's supremely fascinating. And so what do you find most satisfying about your job?
So the people, I think I have to say first, I really enjoy the people here at Mastercard. I think we are a fun company. I think that we're very collegial. We're not that big a company in some ways. We're about 25,000 people. And so we're still small enough that you get to know your colleagues and you get to work with them on projects over and over again. So there are relationships that have been built up over the years. And so people get to know you. So I think the people are one of the best things about the job.
Right.
I do think the innovation, right? I've always been a lifelong learner. When I worked for Harvey Golub, he always said, work at the margins of your ignorance, right? Work on the edge of what you know. So build that center knowledge out. And so I think that data is that raw material of innovation. And like you asked, there's so many things that I need to get smarter and smarter about. There are some days when that feels daunting, but on other days that I get to think things through, and when they're successful, right, people will attribute it, oh, that she figured that out. Isn't that great? Now, there's plenty of things that fall on the cutting room floor, but being that innovative thinker, and trying to put those concepts together and trying to push my team forward, I think, are the things that I really enjoy. I guess maybe it is that design background coming in of trying to figure things out. So, yeah.
Yeah. Every time you mention design, it reminds me of the master in our industry, the icon who came from the design industry, and that's the late Steve Jobs, So,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And John,
So
his
JoAnn,
designer is John Ivy. Yeah. Jonathan Ivy.
yes, John
Yeah.
Ivy
Yeah.
today. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think Steve Jobs just created the DNA into
Mhm.
all Apple products.
Well, he
So,
did for sure. I mean, the rounded edge, the type of glass, all of that,
correct. Yeah,
absolutely
right.
is design thinking and in action in a very, very physical way, for sure.
Right. So we're coming to the end of our time. I'm just curious, what do you wish you knew before pursuing this career?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question, right? Um, Partly I think that I'm surprised when I look back at my career that so much it built upon itself, right? And so what I do tell my teenage, niece and nephews, I tell them not to worry so much, that your career will find its way. I think
Mm,
sometimes young people try to pick now, when they're younger, what their career path is. And I've had a very rich career, very varied career, but it certainly has built to this moment, right? I think what I wish I had known more was to worry a little bit less,
mm,
and enjoy the ride a little bit more. Because there have been moments when I think I was really worried whether we were going to make things happen, and somehow they always did happen. So I think there's a little bit of that, right? Of worry a little bit less early on and trust that the journey will unfold as it's supposed to, because all of the skills that I've acquired in my career, I'm using, right? And so nothing will be wasted. So go where you're interested, and I think the dividends will pay off. I think that's what the advice would be if I could talk to my younger self.
that is great. In fact, I was going to ask you, what advice would you have for younger people, but you've already taken care of that. So I want to ask you one last question.
Mhm.
Tell us something about you that the world doesn't know.
Oh, wow. I think, on the advice and things that people don't know, I think that I try to practice gratitude every day, and be real. And, we've been through a really interesting time with COVID, but I was big on gratitude before then. And I try to, be very grateful, number one, for the people I work with and the people I get to encounter every day, because I think I'm inordinately blessed to get to do the work I do and to meet the people I get to meet, and that people have been so generous with me along my career path. And so I think by trying to practice gratitude in my interactions and try to find time and be generous with people, they go hand in hand. I believe that has paid me back tenfold, that people then are willing to be generous with their time and to teach me. And so in this crazy world, right, I am a teacher too. I guess we didn't touch on that,
I
right?
noticed. Yes.
That
Yeah.
we have a real responsibility to each other. I think COVID tried to teach us that. I'm not sure we learned the lesson very well, but that, we all struggle with the same things. We are more alike than we are dissimilar. And so, for the longest time, I had a little cartoon. It was, I don't know if anybody's going to remember this because this is going back in time, a little Ziggy cartoon. And he was sitting on the edge of his bed and he had a big sign that said, first your pants, then your shoes. And I kept it because that's how we all get dressed. We all get dressed the same way. And I can't help but, for me, right, that practicing gratitude helps me stay grounded in the fact that I've had an extraordinary career and that I get to have an extraordinary impact on things.
Mhm.
And so it makes me mindful of the work that I do and that we are at an extraordinary time with data. We have to be responsible with it. And that, that the next generations are going to have even more opportunity. And so I'm really thinking a lot about that these days, that, how do we make sure that we create really valuable innovation, but that's responsible, given that we are so connected as a globe. And so I guess that I'm going to leave you with that because I don't think I talk about that a lot. So
Yeah, in fact, I was going to bring this up. I noticed that you have been an adjunct professor, and also I saw there's something called First Mover Fellow.
oh yeah, yes.
What is that?
So the Aspen Institute has a variety of fellowships,
I see.
and so this is the one of their programs called the First Movers Fellowship. I think it started around 2009 because I was in their third class of fellows in 2011. But it is for what they call intrapreneurs, close to entrepreneurs, but people who
Mhm.
work inside
Wow.
companies that already exist that do innovation. And
Mhm.
so I'm part of a cohort. My class was called Rig a Bamboo. So hello, Rig a Bamboo fans out there and colleagues. And so what it's really about are people who look for the next thing and how do you innovate inside of a company or a already established organization. And so, innovators, like you talked about Steve Jobs, we see things maybe other people aren't always seeing. And sometimes that's not so easy. And so it was a program to help you feel good about that skill set and to build a group of colleagues that I'm still in touch with to this day that can support you when you are trying to figure something new out. So that's what the First Movers program is about.
Ah, very nice. That's great. JoAnn, thank you so much for being on this show. I'd love to stay in touch because I'm just wondering, as we open up, you'll probably be back on business travel and, so
Yes, we're
how
just
many days,
starting.
I see. How often do you travel? How many countries? I'm just curious.
So, I've just started traveling in the U.S., but there's some trips on the calendar. We'll see if they happen.
Yeah.
I don't get ahead of myself, but I'm getting ready to go to Europe. It looks like the beginning of June. So we'll see if everything goes as planned, and then we'll go from there. But it used to be my travel schedule was pretty hefty. So we'll see. I don't know that it'll ever be quite so hefty. I think we've
Yes.
learned that this method works quite well. But
Correct.
it looks like the travel will come back, and which I think is a good thing. It's nice to see people in person. So looking forward to it.
That's great. Thank you so much once again. It was such
Thank you
a
for
pleasure
today.
to have
Thank
you
you.
on the
Really
show.
appreciate it, and have a great day. Really, thank you for the
You too.
conversation and the
Thank you. Bye
opportunity.
bye.
Bye bye.